Now, let me just introduce you to myself. I am Shriji and I am a success manager in the people's team for Surfboard. Now, the first thing that I would like to say here is thank you for joining this session. It's a great pleasure having you on here, and I ensure you that you're going to take away something important from this session. It's going to be a lovely learning session for the whole of you. Okay. Now, before we move ahead with the introduction as well as the team who's working behind this session, let me just go ahead and give you certain pointers that I'd like to inform you about. Okay. The first one is, as you see, we all are on mute except for the person who's speaking. That's just because if we have a huge crowd and if we try to unmute everyone, there's so much of disturbance that we can't hear the person who's speaking. So we have automatically put you all on mute. Cool. Secondly, if during the session you have any questions that pops up in your mind, we have a chat option here. You can just type in those questions in the chat and our experts will answer your question right at the end of the session. That is in the FAQ sessions. Cool. And one more request from my side to you is, you all guys who have logged into Zoom with your Zoom IDs, can you kindly change it to your name, the Zoom IDs to your name, so that we can recognize you or keep you for a reference in the future. That would be really helpful for us, right? Okay, moving forward. Now I am going to speak more about my company, my people, and you guys. Okay. So to begin with, as you know, we all are in a situation where it's a lockdown. We all are sitting home. We are not able to do the routine things that we like to do. Not able to go to work. No colleges. No friends. We are just on chat. And secondly, speaking about my company, we are based out in Virar, and we have a lot of people all around us working for us in our company. And we have this thought process, that is our company works on this thought process that we have always to give out to the society, right? So we thought, what could we do during this lockdown so that we could, keep you busy as well as ourselves busy with some learning sessions. So we have this idea that popped up that we go on with online sessions for our students who are actually willing to learn a lot as well as understand what technically how they can be sound as well as good. So this was one of the sessions that we came up with. Okay. And secondly, we have achieved a lot as a company. That is, we are one of the best in our whole of the area, I would say. We have done a phenomenal job succeeding all the barriers and coming up to here, which I would be giving you a glimpse on very soon as I run you through the profile of my company. Right. So, getting on to the companies, there is a few companies that I'll be discussing with you, not just one. Okay. So the first one that I would like to start with is Raw Engineering. Raw Engineering is a company that actually helps us with providing world-class services to our customers abroad. We are working with Fortune 500 enterprises as well as startup companies to help them with platforms like web, server, DevOps, as well as integration. That's how it is when it comes to raw engineering. The second company that I would like to speak about is Builder.io, which was one of our products in the market out there, that is especially in the US market. This was an integration product working on SaaS. But we had a giant called Software AG who popped in and said, hey, we'd like to take over your company. That is, they acquired that company actually. And this was a new experience for us. And how many times have you heard that a German company comes and says, hey, I want to acquire your company? That's very few, right? So we went through that amazing experience as well. It was a very exciting phase for us, right? The next company that we have is QuantumStack. QuantumStack is actually, no matter how much I speak about QuantumStack, it's always less. That's what I see, because it has achieved so much as a product company. It is, one of the companies who's a pioneer and industry leader when it comes to headless CNS. And they are one of the companies who has recently had an funding of 30 million. That's a huge thing for a place like us, a company who is actually located in Virar. It's a huge thing that happens. Okay, and that this happens very less. So that is something that I want to highlight here. Okay, so that is the third company. It's a product company that actually is in the US market. They're selling out this amazing product that's an headless CMS, right? Okay, the fourth company that I would be speaking about is Surfboard. Now, Surfboard is a company that looks more into learning and development for all our newcomers, or be it skilled people who are already out there, right? We are the people who actually search for the right skill and assign them to the right company, be it raw engineering or be it content stack. Apart from that, we also do training programs so that we can bring out the skills in a matured people and make them a better professional at the end of the day. So that's what Surfboard Ventures, right? So this is giving a glimpse of the company, but I would also like to highlight that we started as 4, and now we have like 220 people sitting in India and another 100 sitting in the US and Europe. So we are huge. Now you understand how much we have grown over time. It's like amazing. It's a huge growth for us, right? Now moving forward, I would just like to take you through the slide. Now, this is an amazing slide for me because recently we have relocated to the new company. Now, this new company that we have is on the 8th floor for New Viva College. So it is an easy location, wherein anyone can access and, come to. So just giving you a glimpse as in how the new company looks like. It's very exciting for everyone who's working in that company right now because we have an amazing infrastructure. Okay, so just to keep you informed that it's not only the people who have helped us grow, but we have a lot of ex-students from each of your college who's also playing their role. They started their journey as a trainee and now they are professionals, employees with us, as well as engineers who are actually speaking with international customers, having their own experiences, right? That's how it is. Next, I will like to move on to the next slide. Okay, introducing you to my team who actually plays a major role when it comes to organizing such programs. So, Swagata Ghosh here is the head of people team for Surfboard. We have me, who is playing a role again. We have Neerav Patel, who helps us with leading the learning and development department. We have Dhaval Machitia, who is again a documentation manager who's helping us with the whole of this project that we are doing here, the online events. We have Clive, who is actually presenting this program today. We also have Anu Chauhan, who's helping with all the technical aspects, as in running this program smoothly throughout the whole process that we are going through, right? And apart from this is Clive Machado, who's actually going to go ahead and help us know more and get started with JavaScript. So he is the one who's going to introduce us to getting started with JavaScript. So Clive, I would like to step on and start with the event so that,
Yep.
good. Just one thing that I got to say here, Clive, is just the people that we have here, the students who are actually assembled here, that we have an attendance link that has been put into the chat for this Zoom ID. I would request you if you could all go in and fill in your attendance there so that we are aware that yes, you were here, you were present, and in case, if required in the future, we could get in touch with you, right? Thank you so much, Clive. You could start. Best of luck.
Yep. Thank you, Shri, for that introduction. So, hey guys, my name is Clive Machado here, and I'll just give you guys a brief overview of who I am. So, I started my role in this company as I started my role here, my career in this company, Raw Engineering. in the past 3 years ago. And I am actually working on currently on a project called the NBA, the National Basketball Association. If you guys know the basketball association in the US. So yeah, I guess that's enough about me. Let's get on with JavaScript. Why that is why we are here, right? So cool. I just move on to the next slide. Yeah. Right. So what is JavaScript really? Right. So there are a lot of languages around. Right. I mean, we have seen a lot of languages, and all of these languages are there for a reason, right? I mean, they do something, and I'm going to talk about what JavaScript is doing. So I'm going to be focusing more on what is JavaScript really. So I have certain keys, a key list here about what JavaScript is really about. So let's talk about these four things, the key elements. So what is JavaScript? It's a single-threaded, lightweight, object-based functional language. So I want you guys to focus on these key four words over here, and to really get a know-how of really summing it up as what JavaScript really is. We're going to talk about each of these things in the next slides ahead, and let's start with one key thing about here, that what it is. So let's get out of these slides. And yep. All right. So there's one more thing about that I'd like to tell you guys about. One more slide about I'll tell you about is how do you install JavaScript, right? So to really install JavaScript is there's no installation process for JavaScript specifically designed, right? And that is because most major browsers support JavaScript, and it is inbuilt with them. They have this JavaScript virtual machine that loads up what you type, right? Type in JavaScript, and that is why we do not need to specifically install anything. And it is why when you create an HTML page with a script tag or link the JavaScript with it, the browser you have to open it up with the browser so that it gets linked in the browser, right? So let's go back again to basic. Yeah, so I've moved on to my ID, and guys, before starting with JavaScript, make sure your ID is in dark mode. So I can't stress this enough. So just this is something very critical for any programmer. So just make sure that it is in dark mode, because you're gonna be on this screen for more than 2 hours, 3 hours a day, and trust me, dark mode is what you want. So yeah, so let's I'll just create a basic HTML file here. Oops, sorry. I'll save this file first, and I'll save this as HTML file. Okay. So I'll just pull up some HTML code. So there's a don't be overwhelmed about this code. This is a basic HTML code, and you can see the tags over here, HTML tags, the head section, the body section, and the way we start. Let's first load up this web page in the browser. Let's do that first. And hey, let's get right. So I'll do this. I'll open up this in my browser. So yeah, I think there this is, we have a text printed, a basic, a really basic website. So I'm going to do one thing over here. I'm going to go to this inspect element, the dev tools. So we call these as dev tools. So I'm just going to keep it over here, and I'm going to move back. We'll come back over here, and I'm just going to move back to our own web page again here. So in order to really start with JavaScript is that you need to include something, right? You need to include a script tag. So the role of a script tag is it tells the document that it is JavaScript that we are going to be running in this tag. So I'll just add a text here. Right. So I'm just going to go back to our web page and refresh this one. So if you can see, a hello world pop-up was just came out, right? So this is what I mean by the power of JavaScript. With JavaScript, you as a developer have the ability to control web pages, right? So this is a simple basic example wherein you could print something, right? That is how you start off with JavaScript. You could print something as an alert on the page. So let's move back onto this slide again. And yep, so we've done with installing JavaScript. So yeah, with any languages, I think you begin with hello world, right? So yeah, so there's one statement over here about console.log, and let's before going ahead and typing, so we know what a console.log is. So let's just go here to our, yeah, I'm just gonna type console.log here so that you guys can see what it does. Okay, I'll just save this file. I'll go back and I'll refresh this document, this web page. And if you guys can see, I have the same alert message, and I want you guys to watch this space over here, the console section over here. So once I click OK on this, so this is what got printed in this console. And that is basically what a console.log message does. It simply prints something in the console. So basically, a lot of the time, this is used for debugging and stuff. So let's get back to our slides over there. So yeah, so we just did a basic console.log. So before explaining what these things mean, I also want to make sure that you guys understand what objects and functions are in JavaScript. So on the left hand side, you see an object, and the way you create an object in JavaScript. So let's not confuse object with something from in JavaScript. Objects are structured like this with a curly brace and a key value pair. So maybe in English terms, what we call as objects are like a cell phone, or maybe a mobile phone, maybe a remote is an object, right? So JavaScript, it's not that case. JavaScript has this structure known as an object. So what I've done over here is that this is a variable a, uh, which has a curly brace starting and has a key called text and has a value called hello world, and then the curly brace stops. So let's implement this in our actual code. Yep. So let's write an a. We start with a curly brace. We write text over here, and we say hello world. So watch what I'm going to do in this alert section over here. So I need this value text inside inside this object, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type a dot text, and now when I go back to our web page over here, so I'm just going to refresh this once more. So if you guys can see, we have hello world printed here. So just so you know that it is printed from over here, so I'm just going to type once again over here. So I just save the file, I'll go back, I'll print OK, and I'll refresh this page again. So yep, there you have it. So what I essentially did is that I just printed this text in the alert section over here by accessing the value like this with a dot note a dot text. So if you guys notice something, that this a dot text is similar to what the console.log is doing, and we'll get to that exactly why it is doing the way it is doing. So yeah, so this is what is printed. So I want you guys to notice one more thing. Nothing is printed in the console right now, but as soon as I say okay, this is something that is got printed in the console. So notice, I'll just go back to our previous slide, and that is this slide. So the point that I want to stress over here is that why the word single threaded means something over here. You just saw that the alert was at the start of the screen. The first thing that happened, the alert pop up. Then the second thing that happened was the message got printed in the console, and that is essentially what single threaded means. There's no complications in that. Single threaded is simply running the code line by line. So that is what essentially happens with JavaScript. So this is why JavaScript is known as single threaded programming language. So it executes a single operation at a time. There's no complication in that. So it's very simple thing to understand with why say what single threaded means. So let's move on to why this is also a lightweight programming language. So the syntax, if you note, is quite simple. It's not tough. I just created a page, and I just wrote one single line, and I have something that happens on my browser, right? So JavaScript has these minimalistic syntax and features. Okay, we'll get to more of it later on in this, but yeah, that is why JavaScript is so lightweight. And we also discuss about why JavaScript. Let's we just discuss about what objects are, right? So let's discuss about what functions are. So I just move to this slide. So if you see over here, the function is nothing but like there's a function, there's a name of that function, and what it returns back to you, right? Once you uh, call that function. So let's take this function and put it into our code. Let's go back to our VS code. Uh, yep. I just write the function down. So I'm gonna be naming this function a different name. The reason is that I already have a as an assigned over here. So if I say a again over here, the code will not work. That is because it was already defined. Just return something over here. This is printed function. So in order to run this function, we need to do something like this. So I'll just run this function inside the console.log so that we can see what the output is. So I'll just write type B and I call it like this. I'll save it and I'll go back to our web page. So we know we got this from the object, the alert pop-up box. And once I press OK, if you see over here, this is printed from the function. So we got this text printed inside the console like this. So I'll just move back to our slide over here. All right. So you just saw what the console.log is basically. And if you carefully take a note of it, the console is like an object and the log is like a function and the hello world is like a parameter. So we're going to be exploring more of this, exactly what it means. So I'll just again move back to our web page over here. So as I said earlier that every major browser supports JavaScript internally, right? And it has this JavaScript machine. So the amazing thing about the browser is that if you write console.log over here itself, and this will work. So I just got a hey message with console.log that I read, and that is because you can essentially run any JavaScript code over in the console itself. And that is what's again amazing about JavaScript, is that your browser is already loaded with it. So let's look at the console. Okay, I'll just move to this console and watch what it prints once I press enter. I wanted to understand what console is and really understand what it does. Okay, so it doesn't. So if you look at the structure of console that I discussed earlier, the structure for an object. Let's go back and check out what the object structure is, right? So this is an object structure. And if you note that console is again similar to an object structure over here, because that it is an object. So console is a JavaScript provided function which is an object, and the way you access inside that, the log inside of it, is that the log is a key. So let's say I combine, rename this A to, just so that I don't want to reuse the uh, same console. I'm gonna just change the one name over here to K. So let's say this is console like this, and I do this over here, console.text. So this statement is essentially same as this statement if you look at it clearly. And if I go back to our web page and reload it, you'll see that you get the same text over here and you got the console printed over here. So what is really happening is that console in itself is an object, and that is what I mean by JavaScript is object based. uh, so basically what happens is that uh, let's go back to that slide again. Why is JavaScript known as object based language? So this is what happens really. A lot of the things in JavaScript are object based. So essentially you guys can access stuff inside the object. So which is why it is known as object based. And this is something really cool about JavaScript, that it's really that simple to understand, and how it was created as well. So let's move on to this function part about it. And as I earlier suggested, how the function looks like, right? So let's move at the code over here for the function. So this is what a function looks like, right? So let's say what if I combine the object and the function. So how would that look like? So I'll just move back over here. I'll just clear this off and I'll write something over here. I'll say function. I'll just remove this code. and I'll say return hello world. I'm gonna remove this console for now. And here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna run this function like this console.text. So let's move onto our web page over here and I'll refresh this page. So you guys can see the hello world was printed. The same hello world that I wrote over here. Right? So essentially what the console.log message when you type as well, it essentially does the same thing. The structure for the console, and as I said, the log is a function, does the same thing. And this is something really cool that you guys can just directly go to the browser. You guys can do this at your in your browsers as well. So just check out. You can check out. You have a function called as log over here. So you'll also see that there's an f assigned to it. So that is what how you know it's a function. Right. So this is what essentially console.log is. And this is again, once again, I'll go back and why I wanna say that JavaScript is a single-threaded lightweight object-based functional language because a lot a lot of things in JavaScript is essentially these object-based functions, and these a lot of these functions are like inside these values that you can access, and literally that is a lot of the times that is how JavaScript is structured. And once you realize this, you'll see that there are a lot of functions, and then you guys can just access these functions and start using JavaScript. So it's really cool about JavaScript and how you guys can utilize the functions, right? Right. So okay. So let's do one more thing. We'll move on to the next slide over here. So I just told you guys about what exactly happens when you write a console.log. There's a parameter that is being taken. So yeah, just move back to one more thing, and I'll just show you guys an example just to make it more clear. I'll take this code and I'll run it in the browser itself and just pasted it from there. So I have something called as console and I have something called as hello. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say this is a parameter and I'm gonna return that parameter back. Okay. So I'm just gonna remove this alert for now. I'm gonna pass something on. Right. So once I run this code, here's what will happen. You just saw that the text was returned back to me. And once you compare the console to this console structure. So let's check out this console structure that I just created. So check this out. I just have text inside it and as in the function assigned to it. Right. So if you check out the console message, this one again, it's essentially the same. So that is how cool and easy understandable JavaScript is. You guys can you guys can definitely go in your browsers and experiment with this stuff. I mean, it's really fun to do that, right? So yeah, so that is basically how JavaScript. So before I move on to the next topic, I guess I'll ask Sriji. Would you like to share the form for this? We can actually take like a 2 to 3 minutes break here, guys. Just you guys don't get overwhelmed about this information. Just try to understand what I really meant about all these stuff. Right? Over to you, Sriji. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Clive. Okay, guys, Clive is speaking, have been speaking for long, so he's taking a break here. So in the meanwhile, I'll just like to keep you posted as there are a lot of other events that we are planning in the future. And obviously, we have a website that's called www.surfboardventures.com. You certainly can go ahead and subscribe to that website so that we could keep you posted on all the future events that are going to happen. And secondly, also would like to share a small information on the upcoming event. That is, in future we have an event that's coming up, which is going to be called the Innovation Drive, wherein we are actually going to have a lot of participants who are going to show their creativity and innovation technically. There's a lot of people that you might compete with, and the best one, and you can't even imagine what the prizes are going to be. So I want majority of y'all to be there and participate as much as possible. So that is the reason. What I can do here is I'm going to add the link to that website in the chat box here, and you certainly can go ahead and subscribe to that. Cool. So that is something that I'm going to do. And as mentioned previously, please go ahead and mark your attendance in that link. That is the attendance link that we have shared with you, so that we could keep the data and get in touch with you for future reference. This is something for future reference, so that we could let you know about the upcoming events and guest lecture events that are happening with us. Apart from that, yep. We have Clive who's back here. He's all up and running now. So what I'll do is I'll just hand it over to Clive. I'll come with more information later on. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Sriji. Yeah. So cool. So guys, let's get back to this slide. So yeah. So once we understand the console.log what and how it really does. So the reason I want to tell you about console.log and what it really does is because I want you guys to not just type in that print statement. I want you guys to understand exactly how that print statement works and how simple it is to work, right? I mean, it's not that difficult to understand how this structure works. And once you get these concepts, you'll JavaScript is huge, right? So it's better to understand what it was based upon conceptually and understand what it is trying to do, and then utilize these ideas that you can then make a logical connection with, right? So which is why actually this state the console.log statement is pretty much how I would like to define it. uh, so since we talked about the console.log statement, let's discuss about one more thing where you know what we can essentially call as a window object. So let's take one more example regarding the window object, and I'm gonna do something similar about the window object. I'm gonna just do one thing over here directly onto our console message over here, console inspect element over here. Let's call that. I'm just gonna go over here. So once I type window, you guys can see I have a similar kind of structure again. So basically what window is that when you open up a tab, right? This is like a window object. Okay. So once you get this window object, it creates this is the environment that I'm talking about. It is the you will get a lot of functions as well with the window object as well, right? And this is what again JavaScript provides. So I'll just do something over here, something cool, so that I don't. Okay, so I'll say let's I have a function, and I'll just type in right here. So right now you don't need to understand the code, but I'll explain you about this, what I'm typing about in a minute, so soon. So, okay, so I just did something over here, and I'll just hit enter on this. Cool. So, watch what happens when I move my mouse in the white space above. Okay. So, so here's the thing about JavaScript. The reason JavaScript is such a powerful tool is that because again, you guys can manipulate web pages as a developer directly. So what I essentially did over here with this function is that I said whenever the mouse moves over that particular web page, run this function. So you'll find a lot of these function under this window object. And what I have done with this document, I will talk about document next soon, but let's talk about more about what this window did. So I'll just do one more thing over here. I'll write a console.log message first, and I'll say, hey, this is console. Okay. So I'll just hit enter on this as well again. So if did you guys just see what happened when once I move my mouse over to this black area, the hey this is console message was printed. So now it's what my I have stopped moving my mouse, and once I move my mouse, you will see that it's printing the hey this is console 129 times, 154 times, and as I'm moving my mouse it's increasing, right? So that is what essentially happens when I did this function is ran when my mouse moves, right? So that is how cool this window object is. So I'll just quickly change back the color as well. I can change the color back to green over here. So it's a really cool thing what you can do about with just JavaScript, right? So yeah, so let's talk about the next slide over here that we have. So that is what a window object is basically. Let's talk about the document object model. So I want you to understand what a document object model is. So if you guys saw the web page that I created, the HTML tag with the HTML tag, right? Whenever a browser sees this tags, it considers itself as a document, right? It's a document of tags, correct? And what the browser does with these tags is that it takes these tags and converts them into an object model. So the word literally says that it's a document object model. So previously when I tried the document section, that is what it is. So I'll just give you a brief example rather than just keep talking about what it is. So let's go back to this code again, and I'll just refresh this page again, and we have the default page, so that is nothing confusing. So once I type document over here, okay, you just saw there's a blue thing, a blue selector. This is being highlighted. So I'll just do this. I'll just do document dot all. So take a look at this code over here. So we have an HTML tag, we have a head tag. Just for simplicity's sake, what I'll do is I'll remove the meta tag over from here. We have a head tag, we have the title tag, we have body tag, p script, right, and then the closing statements for each tag. So let's go back. I'll just refresh the page so that it's reflecting the actual data. So what I'll do is I'll just hit this. I just typed this document.all, right? Document.all, and I'll hit enter on this. So if you guys can see, there's a collection of the same tags that I just had in that document. So this is what essentially happens in very literal terms. In very literal terms, this is what essentially happens. The document is what is taken by the browser and is converted into something like this structure. So we have the HTML, we have the head, we have the title, we have the body, we have the P, we have the script. And this is really what JavaScript is capable of. And this is what is known as the DOM, the document object model. So it's really cool that you guys can access this document. So there's a difference between the window and the document. So the window is like a parent to the document. So there, if we have a window, the document would be something like this. The window contains the document, right? So that is how it works. The window is like the tab that has this document loaded inside of it. Okay, so let's experiment more with this document and what I did previously as well with the document. So what I did with document is nothing but I just did this. So I said get elements by tag name. So what this will do is that I'll just provide again, watch out how this is structured, right? It's the same way that the object and function is structured. So I just say I want the body tag. So I'll get a list of body tags if I hit on it. So which is why I'll do like a single body tag is what I want. And what I'll do is that I'll give it a style and background. So these are something like properties that I can access for this document. And that is how I achieved. If I do this and hit enter, that is what happens. And if I go back and convert that to maybe, let's say, green, that is what happens. So so you guys, JavaScript again, I'll just jump back to our previous slide over here. And I'm again gonna be stressing on these points where why JavaScript is really object based and why JavaScript is really functional programming language, because you have a lot of these in JavaScript, and you guys are going to be using a lot of these as well. So let's experiment something. Let's experiment. So let's take a real world example. A real world example. Let's say take Facebook. I'll just go to Facebook's site. Uh, cool. So I'll just go and inspect element over here. Awesome. I'll just move. I think there's some kind of printed over here. I'll just clear it out. Anyways, let's say I want to access this part of the web page, this email input box, right? So here's what I'll do. So what I just have over here as is that I'll just say get elements by name, because this is an email field. So I'll just do this. And if I print this, so watch out, once I hover over this, you guys can see that the input box is highlighted, right? So I just accessed the input box for Facebook, and I just type something over here. Let's say I type Gmail over here, and I say value. So I just received the exact data that was typed over here. So this is really helpful when you guys want to let's say try out some stuff with maybe IoT and stuff, wherein you guys can actually create a website where on a button click you guys can trigger some API where if you have a Raspberry Pi, you guys can trigger that Raspberry Pi via that, and maybe the Raspberry Pi switches on some kind of a light or something like that. And it's a very cool way to experiment with this the document object, and you guys can literally incorporate all of these together and you have something that's an. And why I'm suggesting a web page is because once you deploy this web page on the cloud, you guys can access it everywhere, right? So maybe if you guys are somewhere away, and you guys can just check out the website, and you guys can just go and click on that button, and you guys can switch on the light via the Raspberry Pi. So this is something really cool, and this is something really what I would want to stress, that how powerful JavaScript is, and how you guys can actually use it in real life situations as well. Okay, so yeah, so this I hope this Facebook example was quite understandable for you guys, what I did over here. uh, right, so let's cut this out and move back to our slides over here. Right, so yeah, so this is what I mean about uh, JavaScript, right? So the example that I showed you guys earlier is about what I combined things. Okay, I combined things where I took window and I said, okay, if my mouse hovers over this certain section of this area, then inside a function I wrote document dot get element by tag name. The tag name was body, and I fetched this body and I changed the style, the color, the background color of it to black or whatever that I wanted. Right, so you guys can do that as well, and you guys can try this stuff with your browsers as well, and you guys can see how cool it is. The other thing I wanted to tell you guys about why you need to try stuff on over here is because once you go over here, if I just write document over here and I just write dot, you guys can see there are a lot of other functions as well available over here. Right, there's a whole host of functions available over here. And just in case you guys are left wondering, okay, what should I do, what should I do next, how do I test stuff, and what function does what. So you guys can check out the functions that are provided and check out the documentation for these functions. And there are a lot of functions over here. You guys can do a lot of stuff. And similarly, for if you go for window object as well, there are a lot of functions again. So the cool thing about these browsers are that they will provide you with these list of sections, and it's actually really clear and understandable, right? And it's which is why I'm suggesting that you guys can go ahead and try it yourself as well. Okay, cool. So let's go back to this slide. I hope this document object model and the window object and the console object, these mean these examples like have registered in your head, because that is essentially how JavaScript is clearly made out of, right? And once you guys have these key core elements, the core key elements understanding of how it was that JavaScript came to be, you guys will clearly understand the way to use the other stuff that JavaScript provides. And it's really cool because JavaScript is almost like this everywhere. And once you have this understanding, I'm pretty sure you'll start understanding the other stuff that JavaScript has as well. So JavaScript is huge, so we won't be able to cover a lot of stuff, obviously, in this section. But yeah, I think you guys should definitely take a look at what I just told you about after this session. So yeah, uh, what else can I do with JavaScript, right? Basically, whenever you pick up JavaScript, you can become a full stack engineer. And what that means is, right, whenever you are a full stack engineer, you are able to be creating client side applications, web applications. You will be able to create the backend for that application, and you will be able to deploy this whole thing, the whole structure, onto a cloud, so that other people can access it as well via the URL as well, right? So that is what a full stack developer is. And you guys will be like, it will be much faster for you guys to be a full stack developer with JavaScript rather than any other languages, by the way. And JavaScript is that easy and flexible to be mastered with. So that is what a full stack developer is. The second point over here is that JavaScript has a large community. So what happens is that whenever you guys are coding and face some problems, so once you face a problem, you need to go and search about what that problem is, right? And you'll probably go to a Google search and understand what that problem is. And so here's the thing: once you have a huge community for something, what happens is the chances of some other guy uh, having the same problem as you is higher, right? So which is why you will be easily, you can get an easy help from the online community that has already faced those problems, and you will be able to quickly debug what the problem was and move on. So that is the advantage of having a large community. And I know usually a lot of people go to Stack Overflow for debugging and stuff. And so guys, just go and take a look at Stack Overflow's homepage as well. I mean, it's a very cool page. So, you know, we just jump onto the actual problems and stuff. So just take a look at the homepage, and they have a lot of questions. People post a lot of questions over there as well. And they are new questions you guys can answer as well. It's a cool place to be. Uh, and yeah, you can be part of that community as well. Okay, so the third thing over here is the front end and back end part. So again, this is kind of incorporating the whole full stack developer idea, where you guys will be able to not only create the front end side of the application, you'll be able to create the back end side of applications as well, right? So there's a whole host of there's a whole framework, Node.js, you guys can use that codes for server side as well. So we will not go a lot deep into these frameworks right now, because the time might not permit it. But yeah, so yeah, cool. So yep. So let's move on to this statement about. So the strength of JavaScript is that you can do anything, and the weakness is that you will. So what this really says is that, yeah, I mean, the JavaScript can literally do a lot of things right now, and it is evolving every day. In fact, it's evolving like there's something new every 3 to 4 months about JavaScript, and it's really awesome to know that the community is already getting huge and bigger, right? You have a lot more help, and you'll get more resources about JavaScript and the frameworks associated with it. And people are trying to get into a single kind of directional way with this programming language, right? So that is what this quote really means. Okay, so I'll just move on to the next slide. So right, JavaScript doesn't hold back. So we all know that we can create web apps with JavaScript, right? It's we know that you guys can create definitely web apps, use scaled web apps with JavaScript. But there are other things that you can do with JavaScript as well. And as I have these in the slide, basically I have a link over here, and I'll just quickly go over to this link. If I just this is the same link. It's a Babylon.js is basically an engine for game development, and I'm a huge game fan, and I'm a huge gamer, by the way. And yeah, I've recently finished Spider-Man as well. It was 100% completion, by the way. So yeah, I mean, I love gaming. So basically, I'm talking about JavaScript. You can develop AAA games. AAA is like a standard, right? For the very top end games. So if you guys can see, someone Mohang developed Minecraft with just using JavaScript. And if I just click on it and just show you guys a demonstration of how cool this is, so you guys can literally play Minecraft in Java over here. So I can move around. I can just pop up stuff, and I can just collect those stuff as well. And so yeah, I mean, you guys can try this stuff as well. This with this link, just go to Babylon.js and you'll find out a lot of games. And and just go back to the same link. Yeah, so there are other games as well. I think this game is. I think the Assassin's Creed. I think this is similar to the Assassin's Creed Black Flag game. Yeah, so I mean, it's by Ubisoft again. I think there's a Final Fantasy card game. So there are a lot of games actually over here. You guys can create basically with JavaScript as well. So that is what I mean by JavaScript. You guys can definitely create proper games with JavaScript as well. It's awesome that you guys can do that, because the browsers nowadays are very very powerful, right? So coming to the next thing is that there's a lot of misconception about machine learning, where you guys cannot use JavaScript with machine learning. Well, actually you guys can. And there's something known as TensorFlow that Google has. So I'll just go to that side as well. Just go to tensorflow.org. And if you see this website, and with the help of this, you guys can start learning machine learning as well. And we have this section for JavaScript as well. So yeah, and you can deploy models as well on browser and on Node.js as well. So you guys, I would suggest you guys to take a look at this TensorFlow as well if you want, and see how you guys can use JavaScript to create models, and you guys can deploy this model as well. So there is a way to do that with JavaScript as well, not just some other languages that we talk about. So JavaScript is really, really getting into all of the markets basically. It's really getting into all of the markets, and it has this. This is why JavaScript has this flexibility of doing stuff where it shouldn't be doing stuff, but it is doing stuff, right? So yeah, so that is about machine learning. I'll be sharing more links with you about these later on. So yeah, the next thing is the mobile applications. Yeah, right. So the general idea is about mobile application is that when you have a single language, uh, creating two platform applications. So I had this. I remember. I know you guys might have done engineering, or maybe have been through an MCA course or something. I had this something known as phone gap, which basically did is what we coded in JavaScript, and the output was that we could see an iOS application and an Android application, right? And this is again, once again, you guys can literally do create applications with JavaScript as well. So there's JavaScript can literally get into a lot of markets. And this is the cool thing about JavaScript, like it completely goes ahead and tries to capture other markets as well. It's spreading so fast, and creating different platformed applications with just a single language. So now if you really take this into context, you guys can now create a front-end application with JavaScript. You guys can create a back-end application with JavaScript. You can definitely take this application and deploy it to the cloud. You can create mobile applications for iOS. You can create mobile applications for Android. You can create games with JavaScript, and you can definitely do machine learning with JavaScript. So these are just some of the things that I've told you about. There are a lot of other things that the JavaScript is getting into, and once you start really exploring what JavaScript can do, it's really amazing. All right. So yeah, I guess I have some examples for you guys that you guys can take a look at. We'll definitely share the link for this, so you guys can basically start off with a basic counter application. So I'll just show you an example of what a counter application is like. So basic counter application. So it's just I click a button and it adds. You can start if you want to start it off just for practice session. You can just start with a timer as well. You can integrate a timer into your application and it starts a timer. You can pause that timer. You can reset that timer. Right. So just example codes, and definitely the most famous one over here is the to-do application. You can add to-do. So you can add to-do like learn JS, right? So and you can definitely delete some stuff that you don't want, right? So these are some applications that you can definitely try with JavaScript. Okay. And there's also a theme changer where you can change the theme as well. So anyways, so let's I guess that should conclude our session for now, and I guess we can move on to the question answer sessions. Yeah. So I guess Shriji, yeah, you can take over.
Hi guys, yeah, thank you, Clive, for this amazing session. And before we move on to the FAQs, that is question answer round, and check onto the questions that you ask in answers for. I just want to give you a reminder again, guys. That is, can you please go ahead and mark your attendance in the link we have given in the chat box. You can also register or subscribe to the Surfboard website so that we can keep you updated on all the amazing events that we are coming up with. Apart from that, yes, the next upcoming or the most happening event that's going to come up very soon from our end is the innovation drive that we are speaking about today, wherein we have a huge number of participants from different colleges, students from different colleges who are going to participate, and we have a very good prize that's going against it. And I assure you that there will be a lot of innovations that will come out of this drive, and there will be a lot of learning also that happens here. So I would say please stay tuned for the next event that we will be hosting very soon, and do subscribe so that you're aware on the date and time when the event is going to happen. So that's from my side. Now I have Satish, I have Clive, who's going to jump in and answer to all the questions that's mentioned in uh, the chat room. So Satish and Clive, are you all ready?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
guys, just
thank you, Sid.
before thread breaking, just before Satish or Clive starts, also just I think Sriji has already mentioned, so we will be sharing a feedback form as well after this session. So please ensure that you provide your feedback for the session. It helps us to make things better for you. And if we are doing a good job, then yeah, it helps us maintaining it. So both ways. And quickly before we start the Q&A, maybe we'll just pause for a minute. And if anyone wants to put in their questions right now, just drop in the chat box. And then Satish, now you can just start shooting.
There will be a feedback form that will follow up very soon after this event. So please do go ahead and put in the feedback for us so that we can improve on our programs as well. Thank you, Swagata. Thank you for the reminder.
Okay, so since we don't have much Q&A from participants, but I have some here. So there's Omkar asking a question. Uh, how you mentioned full stack development for backend. We mostly use SQL or PHP. So how Python is used in backend? So it's a question related to Python. How will I familiar with Python?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. If you are quite more familiar with Python, you can definitely start. I mean, you can definitely use Python for backend as well. And if you guys, you can check out more docs about Python, you'll find out how you can incorporate it. But you can also use JavaScript with backend as well with Node.js, and it's not, if you are more familiar with Python, then you can, I believe you can definitely adopt JavaScript as well. I guess if that answers your question.
Okay. Satish, would you like to add anything to this before I go on?
Yeah. Before answering the question, I would like to amend the question a bit. So your question is, we mostly use SQL or PHP. Remember, SQL is a database querying language and not a backend language. Yes, we used to use PHP. PHP is not the hard programming backend language anymore for various reasons. Yeah, we use Python, and apart from these languages, we have Ruby, we have Go, we have Code, we have many backend languages. The set of languages that can be used to create backend systems is very vast. You can use many languages, but to start, you can use Python, JavaScript, as mentioned by Clive. Yeah.
And yeah, to add on to that question, the answer to that would be Omkar. It all depends on what you are trying to build on the backend. So now, when we are saying backend, I think the common understanding is you are trying to build some kind of a web server. Okay, and what Node.js and JavaScript helps me do is I will essentially be running JavaScript both on the front end as well as the back end. So what tends to happen is you don't end up learning two different sets of languages for creating that whole stack of the application. You can use one consistent language which can work on your front end and as well as communicate clearly with your backend. Now, again, to add on more to that, when you say a backend, along with your web server, you may also want to incorporate things like a database. You may want to communicate with some backend server, which essentially is running a database. So even in that case, one of the most preferred or favorite databases to go to is MongoDB, which also has a language which is pretty similar to JavaScript. So it's quite optimized to use with JavaScript. So I'm not saying Python is bad. All I'm saying is if you're trying to uh, become a full stack developer, like Clive mentioned, JavaScript will help you get there quickly as compared to other languages. Okay, so at no point should we are trying to make a comparison that Python is bad or JavaScript is good. We're just trying to say that it depends on the use case that you have. So yes, you can definitely use Python for backend, but at the same time, you should consider the power that Node.js brings to a backend web server. Okay, yeah. Satish and Clive, we have another question from Altaf. And yeah, just to add a little more information, I think Altaf would be joining us pretty soon. He
Oh,
is one of our selected candidates. Yeah.
nice.
So yeah. So Altaf has a question. What after JS? How do I build a web app using JavaScript with database?
Yeah, right. Awesome. I think what you're talking about is, I think, two different things. So basically, what here you want to do is you want to load up the JavaScript web page with probably a database, basically. So definitely, you can use a lot of different databases that there are available. I think there is, I think, AWS as well. You can use Firebase as well for the database as well. You can use, as Nirav suggested earlier, MongoDB as well. Right. So you can use definitely any database. You can make sure that it is accessible via an API, and then link it with the web page. So you can create that web page and you can fetch the data. So basically, the idea is you have to fetch the data from the database into your JS application. So you can start building your application, and then you can dynamically start assigning the text maybe from somewhere else with an API call is what we call. So yeah, I guess.
Cool. A few points to add here. Thanks, Clive, for the answer. And uh, a slightly different answer to your question, Altaf, would be, first of all, welcome to raw engineering. And yeah, we can do that in the first place, but it is generally avoided due to general problems in the technology stack. But if you are really keen on building a web app that comes with a database, you can use rel, you can use pouch database. Both these databases are handy and can be loaded on top of the browser. Again, as Clive mentioned, we don't generally do that. We use Mongo or other databases that you can call APIs, and these APIs can fetch data for you. Awesome. So
Okay.
that was the answer,
Yeah,
Altaf.
and
Yeah.
again, Altaf, I'll just like we mentioned, try and deconstruct your application. That is what I would suggest. Don't think of it as a single big application that does everything. First, try and construct the front end, and then maybe in that front end you're filling a functionality which fetches data from a database. So now you don't have to be dependent on any technology. That database could be running on PHP, Python, or for that matter, JavaScript, right? So you will have to get the idea of deconstructing that into smaller components. Okay, I hope that solves your doubt. Now, Satish and Clive, Mansi has an interesting
Yeah.
question.
Very interesting,
Is it
actually. Yeah.
recommended to
Yeah.
learn Node.js? Yeah, is it recommended to learn Node.js as Deno is already in market, which have better features as compared to Node.js?
I can take this one. I mean, Mansi,
I
first of all, yeah.
I saw
Sorry, Clive,
Satish
you want to
very
go ahead?
interested. No, I saw
Exactly.
you
I
very
mean,
interested.
I am. I mean,
Yeah, go
the
ahead.
fact being Deno reached 1.0 last week and was released last year. Mansi, I like the fact that you're keeping up with the industry. And you also know that the Deno is a flipper version of Node. Also, what Deno is from the same author, Rand Dark,
Exactly.
okay, the guy behind Node.js. So what he is doing, he's trying to solve the problems that are not solvable by Node.js. Okay, so as I said earlier, Deno reached version 1.0 last week, and the community is really small. Okay, so just I assume you are a fresher or you are just out of college pursuing your career. I believe it is a better idea or a better decision to be a part of Node.js community, learn it first, and then check out what Deno is. Okay, so Deno is a derivative of Node.js. Obviously, it is trying to solve problems. The change here is Deno also supports TypeScript, which is not supported by Node.js earlier. So yes, definitely you can try Deno, but it is very certain that Deno will not be ruling the market so pretty sooner, because Node.js is currently ruling the backend markets, and it takes really time. In fact, Node.js took around 8 years to capture the market. Right, it was back in 2009, and it was almost around 2015 and 16 you started to see these applications built on top of Node.js. So Deno is gonna take its time for sure, and you have that time to get started with Node.js. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll add to this as well. So the usually with this recently Deno came out, and as Satish mentioned, it's the same creator that to solve the problems in Node, he kind of had this Deno as a kind of it's just a reverse. The words are arranged in that way. Node is arranged in Deno. So basically, so taking the points where is answering in short, is Deno going to replace Node.js? Not soon, as Satish mentioned. Should you learn Deno? Yes, you should. Should you learn Node.js? Yes, you should do that first. Has PHP died? Ask yourself. Yes, it has lowered, but it is not dead yet. There are certain applications that still use PHP as server side, right? So similarly, will Node die because Deno is out? No, it won't completely, because there are a lot of applications that use applications that still use Node.js, and usually completely shifting from one technology to another does take time for large scale applications. So I hope that answers somewhat your questions. But I think as Satish said, I think you should start first with Node.js and not Deno. Understand what Node.js is, then move on to Deno.
Great. So now we have another question from Mansi. This is a different Mansi. Mobile app development using JS. Is it easier to build than Android Studio, or is it difficult? So basically,
Yeah,
comparison between, yeah.
I can take this up. So Mansi, to your question, I when in college I was very much intrigued by Play Store and how we can earn from Play Store, right? As a developer, you can earn, and I in fact earned some cash from Play Store as well in my college days. And I had around like 5 applications on the Play Store. I have a Play Store account, and I had like 5 applications on Android Play Store. So what I found is that it was quite difficult for me to get to the Play Store using the Java language. And there was a way where what happened is that later on in my career, I happened to have find as a freelancer, I found a client who wanted to actually he wanted an application, basically a simple application, his website as an app, right? So what I did is that I just did it with JavaScript, and I gave him this Android application as a mock. And since I was good at JavaScript, I found it quite easier to just give him that application rather than just going with the Java flow. And later on, he had some ideas about iOS as well. We did not go into it, but I could say that yeah, I could develop in iOS as well. So the ability for you to say then that yes, I can do it in iOS as well and Android as well. It's yes, you can do it JavaScript, and you can do it for both platforms. You can opt for Android Studio as well, but it's I according to me, it's much easier doing with JavaScript rather than going ahead with the actual native application. But yeah, it is obviously a preference, but yeah.
Uh, Thanks, Clive. The next question is from Kritika Pujari. Uh, and again, she is one of the person who will be joining content stack or raw engineering. So,
Awesome.
can you more about getting started with IoT using JavaScript?
Okay. Yeah. Yep. The earlier example that I gave you guys about is about maybe uh, you guys can use Raspberry Pi basically, and Raspberry Pi is nothing but a computer. Okay, it's a CPU, you can say. And once you insert an SD card, the SD card acts like let's say a computer has a hard disk, right? The SD card acts like a hard disk, and in this SD card you can load up uh, you can load up a lot of OS, an operating system inside this. And the ideal OSs that usually people load is the Raspbian OS. You can even load up Ubuntu inside of it. You can even load up Windows. You can load up a Mac. Obviously, if you have the OS files as well, and you can load up in that Raspberry Pi. And as you can use Node.js on a computer that you use, you can definitely use Node.js inside Raspberry Pi as well. And then there are certain connectors with Raspberry Pi. Okay, these connectors you can connect with take a simple, maybe a wire or something, and connect it with a simple bulb or something. And once you have this code for the node for Raspberry Pi Node.js, you can definitely deploy this somewhere and have an API linked. And then you can definitely go ahead and create a JavaScript website somewhere differently, or maybe in your computer, right? And you can click on the button, and it can fire up that API, which will trigger the Raspberry Pi, which will light up that bulb. So this is a very basic example. The reason I'm telling you about is that we had done this something back in college, where we had a Raspberry Pi B, and actually we created a rover out of it. We did not create a light bulb, something like that, but we could do that. I mean, you could load up different types of OSs in it. So it's if you check out the documentation, it's very simple like that. So to point out your question, first understand JavaScript, then understand Node.js, then understand the Raspberry Pi, understand how Raspberry Pi works, then start integrating that Raspberry Pi with Node.js and JavaScript. So if these may be the steps, maybe if that helps you to start up.
Yeah, and to add on to that, Kritika, you really need to understand that when you talk about IoT, essentially it's just a technique. Okay, so this
Exactly.
technique can be implemented either by using JavaScript. You can even use C, C++, Python. Okay, so the core idea is how are you implementing the logic, and are you able to separate the front end from the back end. Now, the reason why Clive and the team we're talking so much about front end JavaScript is because that makes our application independent of any device specific installation. So if I'm running a Python GUI, I'll end up installing Python on my machine and then I will run the GUI. But instead of a web app, I can simply open it on my cell phone and start connecting it. So that device dependency is removed by JavaScript and a web app essentially. Okay. So next time you think of IoT, try and deconstruct it into these parts. Again, you don't have to use pure or vanilla JavaScript for this. If you just do a simple Google search, you will find a lot of libraries and a lot of frameworks that already provide iOS related functionality, right? So you can pick and choose from them. But again, for all of this, your core fundamentals of JS should be very strong. Okay. So then you can just simply apply it to IoT and the relevant principles. So first, like Clive mentioned, deconstruct it into smaller parts and then tackle each part separately. I hope that answers your question. So Omkar has a question which says, according to you, also learning HTML, CSS, JS for server API, what should I prefer, Python or Node.js? Can I take this question?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So Omkar, I'm going to simply ask you. I am going to ask you one question. Do you want to learn one language or do you want to master two? Is it easier to master one language or is it easier to master two languages simultaneously? So, like to become an expert with Python at the same time become expert with JavaScript, or become an expert with JavaScript. Which one would take lesser time? I think one mastering one language would take a little lesser time. I think that's how everyone works, right? All of us are single-threaded in that manner. So when I say learn HTML, CSS, and JS, if you are good at JS, if you can build a good front end, just pick up Node and start using the same JavaScript on the backend. So your functions, your objects, your data would have that similar structure. So why do you want to have a different language for the front end and a different language for the back end? You will end up mastering two things, and in most of the cases you will not do none. You will not do either of them. So if you are trying to build a full stack application, pick up JS, pick up a front end library like React. Definitely that means you need to know HTML and CSS. Okay, so whenever we say JavaScript, the three things HTML, CSS, JS, they go hand in hand. So they are must. Like today when Clive mentioned, HTML was a prerequisite. Okay, so in my opinion, and since you are looking for that entire application, pick up JS, learn React, learn Node, and then try and connect them. Okay, these may be bigger technologies, but trust me, when you learn JS, all of this will become like just a simple thing, simple project which has everything similar in terms of programming.
I
I
think,
hope that.
so I think just to add again for that, Omkar, this really boils down to how fast you want to get that application out to the client, right? So if the client says, I want that in 1 month. So if you start saying, yes, so I'll build maybe the JS, the first front end side of it in JavaScript, and then start Python, and then get the server side in Python. So it's gonna be really difficult for you to doing two things with two languages, and ideally, which is why it's evolved in such a way that the market has evolved in such a way that, hey, why do this? Why have two languages doing two stuff, right? Let's have these developers who are good at JavaScript, let's have them do some server side as well. And hey, now I can see that the server side developers now can easily communicate with the front end side developers as well. And trust me, there are a lot of communication back and forth that happens between two developers as to, and the arguments about which key is right and which key is not. Trust me, I've been into a lot of arguments, and it gets very hectic when the application is huge. He wanted us, the front end guy demands it that I want it in this certain way, and the back end side, the server side says that, oh, this key is not possible, maybe this is possible for you. So these things happen while you're actually developing an application. So if this was the case with the Python case, a lot of time there would have been a communication gap between two developers as well. But again, this is implied that again, if there are multiple developers, but if it's you just developing with two different languages, again, this is going to take a lot of time for you for your development, and which is why it's ideal or recommended to definitely use the same thing, because it's going to be doing the same thing, right, in the end. And that is how you can earn more clients and do more stuff in shorter time.
Okay, I think that is that these are the questions that we have. So we can kind of wrap up the FAQ.